What's up, guys? Welcome back to Everyday Money. Now, Congress just passed the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill, the one that's supposed to be used for physical infrastructure like bridges, railways, dams, electrical systems, and such. And that right now is going to President Biden's desk to be signed. And while we hope that that puts money into our aging infrastructure here in the United States, there's always that question that comes up is, how are we going to pay for this? How is this going to affect our national debt? How is this going to affect inflation? And on top of that, there is another $1.75 trillion social spending bill that's going to go into a whole bunch of social programs such as like paid leave and free community college, things of that nature, that was as high as $6 billion, that got whittled down to $3.5 billion and has now been whittled down further by Democrat centrists down to about $1.75 trillion. And the thing that it just continuously comes up is, how can the government spend like this? What is this going to do to our debt? Won't our kids and grandkids have to pay off this debt? And the answer is not necessarily, because if you think about it, have you ever received a bill for past debts owed? Have you received a bill for your share of the Vietnam War, from the Iraq War, one or two, for any of the space programs or anything like that? And the answer is no. And the reason why government can spend forever, and I mean forever in deficit spending, is the same boogeyman that is haunting us right now with higher prices on nearly everything, and that is inflation. And so that's what I want to talk to you guys about today, about how the government can spend almost indefinitely as long as they walk a very tightrope between spending and inflation. And all I ask in return is that you hit that like button for me. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, so hit the subscribe button down there, hit the notification bell, and we'll get into it. Now, I think by now that you guys have seen that I don't really like to get political on this channel, but every one of these things has a political implication to it. For example, these infrastructure and social spending bills, they have a certain political air about them. They lean a certain way. People have very political feelings on it. But when we're talking about the spending, I don't really want to get into the political side of it, because there's spending on both sides of the aisle. It might be that we want to build a new aircraft carrier, that we might want to build a new fighter jet or bomber, and someone else wants to do some sort of social spending that's going to cost billions or trillions of dollars over time. And that always ends up getting added to the national debt, because in general, the United States government spends more than it takes in every year, essentially since the beginning of the country. There was one point in the country's history where we were not in any type of debt, but then quickly after that, we got into debt extremely fast. And people are always like, how can we afford this? How can we afford this debt? And the thing is that as the inflation goes up, as inflation numbers tick by, the debts that are taken on by the government lose value relative to the future. So essentially, at a 3% rate of inflation, which is the average rate of inflation historically, and it's higher right now. It has been much higher in the past. It has been lower in the past. But on that 3% rate of inflation, about every 30 years, any debt that was taken on is essentially worthless. That might sound crazy, because the things that we have to look at for us as people, we want to pay off our debts because we have a limited time on this earth. And I hate to say this, but everybody out there is going to die. You and I and everyone. And you have a certain period of time in which to pay off your debts if you would like to, at some point in your life, be debt-free. But the reason that the United States government can continue to increase the amount of debt that it has is because over time it becomes worthless, and the United States is essentially an indefinite idea, an indefinite being, however you want to look at it. I have a few examples of how this debt becomes essentially worthless over time. Because if you think of some of the largest expenditures in the United States government's history, and if you guys are watching from outside of the United States, I have much less knowledge on Great Britain or China or Australia or Japan or wherever you guys are watching from. So, but this inflation and debt all pretty much work the same way worldwide, so this should apply to everyone, but these specific examples are from the United States. And if you look at, like, for example, the Revolutionary War, where we declared our independence from Great Britain, it cost $2.4 billion. Now, today, in 2021, $2.4 billion is nothing. I mean, it is just, it's not even a drop in the, it's a drop in a drop that goes into the bucket. A lot of folks think of the Vietnam War as a very expensive operation that we did, and especially in the terms of human lives cost, extraordinarily expensive. But if you look at it just from the cost of the war in financial terms, $168 billion for the entire Vietnam War. And I'm sure that was a gigantic cost at the time, but now we are 50 years removed from the end of the Vietnam War, almost 50 years, like 45 or so. That is an almost inconsequential number to anything. The Apollo moon program, where we took men from the Earth, landed them on the moon, brought them back safely, $25.8 billion. So my point here is that over time, these numbers have gotten smaller because of inflation. And that is how the government is able to consistently spend more than they take in and not go bankrupt. Because right now, for the year 2021, we are looking at about $4 trillion of tax receipts. Now, the interest payments on the debt, which is around $30 trillion, is about $562 billion, which is only about 14% of the revenue taken in by the government this year. And when you look at it like that, that's not such a bad amount. And I'm not saying that having a large amount of government debt is a good thing, but if we can purchase things that allow us to get a competitive edge right now and pay for them with dollars in the future that will be worth less than the dollars are now, you can essentially see how the government can buy things and basically never pay for them ever. Now, this all hinges on a couple of things. One, that growth can keep up with the rate that the interest payments on the debt are going up. Because if growth would pull back, but interest payments continue to pile up, the tax revenue generated by the government would not be enough to cover those interest payments. Another thing is if the debt just spiraled so high so quickly that it was out of control and the growth could not keep up with that level of debt spending, that would also be a way that things go off the rails, and that very well could happen. The biggest risk, though, is rate increases. Is if the federal government has to raise interest rates for whatever reason, for example, to rein in out of control inflation like they had to do in the 70s, and that will, in my opinion, likely have to happen to get the inflation under control here in the 2020s. And that would drastically increase the cost of the interest debt payments to the point where it may be untenable to either add more debt to the federal deficit, or it could make the current level of debt unaffordable. When you look at this debt versus inflation thing, this is why I say that you typically should not pay off your long-term low interest debts relatively quickly. For example, like your mortgage debt, because the same principles that can be used for the federal government to essentially never have to pay off their debts can be applied to your mortgage. Because, for example, if you have a mortgage in the 2s, 3s, or 4s, even 4s, which are considered high interest right now, but especially in the 2s or the 3s, the bank is essentially losing money to inflation on your loan. And so if you take a $200,000 mortgage in 15 years, that money is only going to, or that debt is only going to be worth about 50% of what you took it for. So whatever is left to pay for on that debt, which will probably be the majority of it, since mortgages are interest loaded in the front, that debt will actually be worth quite a bit less than what you ended up taking it on for. And so you can sort of use the same way that the government uses to basically never pay their debts to drastically reduce the effective cost of long-term debts such as your home mortgage. Guys, if you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. That really helps me out in the YouTube algorithm. If you're not a subscriber yet, hit that subscribe button down below to grow your wealth, increase your success, put you on the road to financial freedom. Don't forget to hit that notification bell. I appreciate you guys watching today, and I'll see you in the next one.